Everyone needs a coach. It doesn't matter whether you're a basketball player, a tennis player, a gymnast, or a bridge player.
So that was an opening in one of a TEDx talk that was presented by Bill Gates. In that talk, Bill Gates mentioned how teachers should have a coach who can give them feedback on their performance. He said that the situation is quite ironic because the teacher's job is to teach students, but many teachers do not have someone more experienced to mentor them or to coach them. When the teacher's performance improves, this will improve how the subjects are being taught in the classroom. Now, how is this related to Scrum Master, you may ask? Now, imagine if a teacher's performance can improve when they are being coached or mentored. The same thing can happen to the Scrum Master's performance when they are coached or mentored. I have already made a video on 8 Scrum Master hats on this channel, and in that video I have explained about the differences between the coach hat and the mentor hat. Now, to avoid confusion, I will use the term mentor instead of coach throughout today's video. If bringing more impact to your company is one of your aspirations this year as a Scrum Master, one of my advice to you is get a mentor. Now, when I reflected on Bill Gates' talk, I realized there are quite a few Scrum Masters around me who do not have any mentors. Many of them, in my opinion, are just like walking in the dark because they're learning and practicing Scrum without any mentor who can give them any feedback. Now, don't get me wrong here. I don't think there's anything wrong with learning Scrum through self-taught. In fact, I was one of those people. In the early days of my journey with Scrum, which was between 13 to 15 years ago, I self-taught myself Scrum through reading lots of books. Today, when I look back at those early days of my journey, I regretted many of the mistakes that I have made. There were several practices that I shouldn't have done with the team, and I think there were practices which I should have done more with the team. Now, I would have been on the right track if I had a mentor much earlier in my journey with Scrum. But my challenge 15 years ago was I could not find any Scrum practitioners near me who knew Scrum right down to the essence. Back then, I would say many Scrum practitioners in these regions are still figuring things out. And on top of that, back then there weren't that many companies who invested fully in Scrum in this region. Many Scrum practitioners who were mentored directly by Jeff Sutherland or Ken Schwaber, in my opinion, were out of reach. Now, there were some Agile Manifesto signatories who were quite active on Scrum and Extreme Programming mailing list. One of that person was Ron Jeffries. And every time I asked questions on the mailing list, Ron would reply back. But I still find it hard to understand Scrum only by reading his replies. But I think the story would be so much different if I was with him in the same room having a conversation. Back then, many Scrum trainers, mainly from Scrum Alliance, delivered inconsistent messages about Scrum. Now, this confused me even more. And as some of you probably already know, that was one of the reasons why in 2009, Ken Schwaber founded Scrum.org. One of his visions was to ensure that every Scrum.org trainers deliver consistent and reliable messages on Scrum. Because inconsistent and unreliable messages on Scrum might make people have negative reaction towards Scrum. And he doesn't want that to happen. Today, I would say the situation is a lot more different than 15 years ago. Today, it is much easier to find Scrum practitioners who know Scrum right down to the essence and will be able to deliver reliable information and messages about Scrum. These people can be your mentor. Having a mentor, from my personal experience as a Scrum Master, is extremely valuable. And I will share with you 4 reasons why a Scrum Master will find value in having a mentor in their journey with Scrum. The first and the most fundamental reason why having a mentor is valuable is because you will have someone to help you understand the core essence of Scrum. I was not able to understand the core essence of Scrum just by reading that 13 pages long Scrum guide. And not only that, in fact, I already took the 2-day Certified Scrum Master or CSM training from Scrum Alliance 12 years ago, and I still did not understand the core essence of Scrum after I completed the training. And back then, Scrum Alliance did not have any assessment to assess students' understanding about Scrum. I only need to attend the training to get certified. After I attended the CSM training, the director of the company where I worked asked me to explain Scrum to him. And embarrassingly, I was not able to explain it to him, even though I already attended the CSM training. And after that situation, to pay back my embarrassment, I tried implementing Scrum based on my personal interpretation. I thought that Scrum was just an iterative compressed waterfall. And I thought that Scrum Master's job is no different to project manager's job. And I thought the product owner is just another name for a glorified business analyst. And I thought the goal of Scrum is no different than the goal of waterfall. That is to get accurate estimates and then deliver the project on time, on scope, and on budget based on those estimations and plans. During this period, I put a lot of effort and emphasis to map story points to hours. I also thought that the 3 questions that were mentioned in Scrum Guide version 2017 and prior was meant as the status update for the Scrum Master. Now, I had all of these misperceptions about Scrum because I self-taught myself and I brought my personal bias. I didn't have any mentor who could give me any guidance. I unconsciously implemented bad Scrum even though I already had a CSM certification under my belt. But that CSM certification didn't improve my understanding of Scrum and it didn't help me to let go of my bias. And when I looked at the present, I also noticed there are quite a few people who already have Scrum Master certification under their belt but still think and act like a project manager. Now we have to admit that each and one of us as human beings have biases. And if we don't have any mentor who would be courageous enough to nudge us, we would not know if we unconsciously map Scrum to project management. Now fast forward after this whole experience, a few years later, I joined Scrum.org and from there, I was mentored directly by Ken Schwaber. And I also had several interactions with Gunther Verheyen and Richard Hanhausen, who were also Ken Schwaber's mentees. And from that point, I finally understood the core essence of Scrum. It took me several verbal conversations and emails with Ken Schwaber before I could finally understand the core essence of Scrum. And that whole mentoring experience happened from 2012 until 2017. Now, the second reason why having a mentor is valuable is because you can have someone to provide you feedback whether you're currently on the right track and not deviating towards bad Scrum implementation. I personally think this is important. From my personal experience, if the company and the team we are serving experience bad Scrum implementation, they might feel that Scrum is no different to project management. And in the long run, they might feel dissatisfied with Scrum and then they will become disengaged with the whole process. And it is also possible they will share their bad experience about Scrum, whether on a blog post, forums, or social media. The third reason why I think having a mentor is valuable is because you can have someone who can offer many different perspectives that can inspire you to implement Scrum differently, but without deviating from the core essence of Scrum. Scrum, as many of us already know, is just a framework. And because it's a framework, there are many things that are not prescriptively defined in the Scrum Guide. Because of this reason, there is a possibility that we can implement bad Scrum. You can implement bad Scrum just like how you can play bad soccer even though the rules of football have been standardized by FIFA. A great mentor can give us many different perspectives and at the same time observe from the peripheral to ensure that we stay on the right track. Sometimes you can learn from your own failures, but you don't always have to fail before you can learn something. You can avoid the failures that have been experienced by other people, in this case, your mentor. That's why many educational institutions exist, so we don't have to go through the whole process that has been experienced by those before us. But on the other spectrum, that doesn't also mean you have to implement everything according to your mentor's experience. You can improvise the implementation based on your mentor's experience according to the context at your workplace, but without getting off track from Scrum values and principles. Seeing many different perspectives of how your mentor implements Scrum and also the other Agile complementary practices can only happen through a bi-directional conversation. And the value you get out of that verbal conversation is something you may not get if you are self-taught. And now, the last reason why I personally think having a mentor is valuable is because you can have someone to remind you when you may be heading in the wrong direction. It is possible you were successful as a Scrum Master at one company, but when you move to another company, you get dragged away by the habit or the behaviors of the people in that new company. And your bias may confirm that what everyone is doing in that company is correct because everyone is doing it. Now, we have to be careful with confirmation bias and group thinking. Just because everyone is doing it, it doesn't mean it's the correct thing to do. And I want to use an analogy to explain this point. Now, in certain cultures, I won't mention which culture, corruption may be seen as the norm because a lot of people in those cultures are doing it. But we know that corruption is not the right thing to do. Now, from here we can learn that just because the majority of people are doing it, it doesn't mean it's the right thing or the correct thing to do. That's why we have to be careful with confirmation bias and group thinking. Now, a mentor can remind us to stay within the Scrum values and principles. Your mentor can remind you when you might be deviating back to the old habit that is against Scrum values and principles. So folks, I have shared with you 4 reasons why having a mentor is valuable for Scrum Masters. Now, if you're a Scrum Master, you may be asking, how can you get access to a mentor? If you're working in a large corporation, it is quite possible you have access to many experienced Scrum Masters in that company. It is also possible that the person who initiated Scrum still works in that company. If that person already left the company, try to get their contact details, get access to them, and learn from their experience working down the trenches. If you are the first and only Scrum Master at your company for the time being, because you are the one who is currently initiating Scrum at your company, you can get access to great mentors from agile communities near you. And I can tell you that there are an immense number of agile communities out there. All you have to do is just look around. You can find many of them on meetup.com, or sometimes you can find their activities on social media. Some of these agile communities meetups can be attended in person. And during the pandemic, we have seen there were a lot of virtual or online community meetups popping up everywhere. So try to get access to a great mentor from these agile communities. In some cases, if you have attended a Scrum Master training and you really click with the personality of the trainer, you can ask them to be your mentor. Hey, it doesn't hurt to try. They might ask you for a professional fee, but in some cases, they might be willing to do it for free, but with something in return, like a follow-up consulting gig or a larger training contract at your workplace. The point I'm trying to make here is the amount of mentors you can access these days is a lot more when compared to 10 to 15 years ago. You just need to look around. And these days, distance is no longer an issue because many of these mentors who provide professional services are accessible through online media communication tools like Zoom or Microsoft Teams. So that is all for today's vlog, everybody. Hopefully you found this vlog worth watching. Click that like button down below if you found today's vlog valuable to you. Subscribe to this channel if you're interested to see more content specifically targeted towards Scrum Masters. I hope this year will be an awesome year where you can bring more impact at your workplace. I will see you in my next video, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'm fading to black now.